In the heart of the village of Monteneve, where traditions were passed down like precious heirlooms, lived Elias, a boy whose eyes shone with a light that no one could explain. From an early age, he showed signs that his life would be different. Although it wasn't something Elijah fully understood, the evidence was present in every moment of his childhood. It was as if God had set him apart for a special mission, marking his soul with traits that made him stand out. Before continuing, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel and make sure you receive more content like this, full of inspiring stories about chosen ones and reflections that can transform your life. The first time anyone noticed this was during a Thanksgiving meal, when Elijah was just 6 years old. The table was set, full of simple dishes, but made with love. While the adults thanked loudly for their blessings, Elijah remained silent. He stared at the candlelight, as if he could see something beyond. When asked what he was grateful for, he replied, "For being able to feel when someone needs me." It was an unusual response for a child, but one that his mother immediately understood as something unique. From the first years of his life, Elias knew he was different, even if he couldn't explain exactly how. While other children seemed to find joy in running around the fields and inventing noisy games, Elias preferred silence. He liked to sit under the trees in the woods behind his house, watching the leaves sway in the wind. It was as if nature was talking to him, revealing secrets that no one else seemed to hear. His grandfather, who often found him in moments of contemplation, would say, "Boy, you have eyes that see beyond what's in front of you. God has given you special sight." However, this uniqueness wasn't always easy to carry. At school, Elias was teased for being more introspective. His classmates called him the boy from the clouds, mocking his tendency to get lost in thought. But Elias never held grudges. He accepted the difference as something natural, even if he didn't fully understand it. On Thanksgiving Day of his 7th birthday, during the communal supper at church, the pastor asked the children what they were thankful for. While the others mentioned things like toys and sweets, Elias replied, "I'm grateful for being able to see what people feel, even when they don't say anything." His response generated silence in the room. The pastor, moved, commented, "That's not something you learn, it's a gift." This keen perception manifested itself in various ways. One day at Christmas, while everyone was gathered around the big tree in the square in Monteneve, Elias noticed a woman holding a small boy wearing clothes that were too thin for the cold. She was smiling, but her eyes seemed full of concern. Without hesitating, Elias ran to her house and returned with a blanket. He handed it to his wife, who hugged him in tears. Later, his mother asked him, "What made you do that, Elias?" He answered simply, "I felt she needed it." Romans 12:2 says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." This difference that Elijah carried was not a burden, but a mark. He was shaped for something special, and his uniqueness was just the first sign of it. At the age of 8, Elias began to notice that his awareness of the world around him was sharper than that of other children. He noticed details that no one else saw. A sudden change in someone's behavior, the distant sound of footsteps that others ignored, or even the feeling that something was about to happen. This perception seemed instinctive, as if his senses were guided by an invisible force. On Thanksgiving Day that year, Elias was sent by his mother to get flour from the neighbor's house. As he passed through the woods, he felt a chill, as if something wasn't right. He stopped and stood in silence, listening intently. Then he heard a faint moan coming from a denser part of the forest. He followed the sound and found a fallen man, his ankle trapped between two rocks. The man was a traveler passing through the village, and Elias helped him free himself, taking him to his house to be cared for. When he told his mother what had happened, she just murmured, "God guides you, my son." This kind of insight was not something Elijah could control. It seemed to come at the most unexpected moments, but always with a clear purpose. The following Christmas, while helping to prepare the church crib, he felt that restlessness again. Following his instinct, he went out into the square and found a small dog stuck in a ditch full of snow. He rescued the animal, which was adopted by a family in the village. Proverbs 20:27 says, "The spirit of man is the lamp of the Lord, searching all his inward parts." Elijah was like that lamp, illuminating paths that he himself didn't understand, but which knew exactly where they led. Among the most striking signs that Elijah showed from an early age was his unusual empathy. He didn't just notice people's suffering, he felt it as if it were his own. One day, in the winter of his 9th year, Elias saw a little girl crying silently while selling cakes at the Monteneve market. It was obvious that she was sad, but no one seemed to notice. Elias approached her and asked, "Are you all right?" The girl reluctantly explained that her father was ill and that she needed to sell the cakes to buy medicine. Without hesitation, Elias returned home, took the money he had saved in a cookie tin, and bought all her cakes. The girl returned home with the money she needed, and Elias felt a peace he couldn't explain. When his mother found out what he had done, she said, "Not everyone has such a sensitive heart, Elias. This is a gift." This empathy wasn't limited to people. Once, while walking in the hills, he came across a fallen bird, unable to fly. He carefully picked it up, took it home, and looked after it until it was strong enough to return to the wild. These gestures were natural for Elijah, as if they were part of his very essence. Romans 12:15 teaches us, "Rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep." Elijah lived this passage every day, reflecting God's love in his actions. From a very young age, Elijah had dreams that seemed to carry messages. They weren't ordinary children's dreams, but visions so real that he would wake up with his heart racing, as if he had lived them. The most striking happened at Christmas when he was 10 years old. That night, Elias dreamt that he was walking through a dense forest, shrouded in a thick fog. Ahead of him was a golden light that seemed to show him the way. He followed the light until he found a wooden bridge with loose, fragile planks, which he had to cross to reach a field full of golden wheat. When he woke up, he felt that the dream was more than an invention of his mind. A few days later, while helping his mother distribute Christmas hampers in the village, he came across a woman crying alone on a bench in the square. She told him that she was facing a great loss and didn't know how to start again. Elijah remembered the golden field from the dream, and without fully understanding why, said, "Sometimes we have to cross difficult bridges before we reach what God has prepared for us. But He is always guiding." The woman hugged him, thanking him for his words, which seemed to have brought her the peace she was looking for. Dreams like this were repeated, always full of symbolism and meaning. Once, on Thanksgiving Day, Elijah dreamt of a river overflowing and threatening to flood a house. The next day, while out walking, he saw a stream that seemed about to burst its banks. He warned the nearby residents, who reinforced their defenses before the rains increased. The village pastor, upon hearing the story, said, "God speaks to us in many ways, Elijah. He gives dreams to His chosen ones so that they know what to do." Job 33:15-16 confirms this. In a dream or in a vision by night, when deep sleep falls on men and they sleep in their beds, He gives them instructions. Elijah knew that dreams were not coincidences, but divine promptings that he needed to listen to and follow. For as long as Elijah could remember, there were situations in his life, that could only be explained by divine intervention. His mother often said, "You have an angel by your side, Elijah. God is watching over you because he has something important for you to do." He didn't know exactly what this meant, but the events of his life confirmed these words. When he was 7 years old during a snowstorm, Elijah slipped on a slope while playing in his backyard. All seemed lost, as the ground was slippery and the ravine was deep. But at the last moment, a strong branch caught his fall. He returned home shivering, but unharmed. When his mother heard what had happened, she held him tightly and whispered, "God is watching over you, my son." Another episode happened on Thanksgiving Day. While gathering firewood in the forest, Elijah heard the sound of trees falling. A huge trunk suddenly came crashing down, but stopped a few centimeters from where he was standing, as if something invisible had held it. He walked home in silence, but he knew there was something bigger protecting his steps. In Psalm 91:11 it says, "For he will command his angels concerning him, that they may keep him in all his ways." Elijah felt this protection as a constant embrace, a force that kept him safe even in the most difficult situations. One of the things Elijah valued most was the constant feeling that God was near. From an early age, he had the habit of talking to God as if he were a close friend. It wasn't something taught or forced. It was a practice that came naturally. In moments of doubt or fear, Elijah would close his eyes and whisper his prayers, immediately feeling a calm fill him. Once, at Christmas, Elijah was helping to set up the church crib. As he positioned the figure of the angel, he felt an inexplicable warmth in his chest, as if a silent voice was saying, "I am with you." He looked around, but the church was empty. Despite this, he felt deeply accompanied. On Thanksgiving Day, this connection manifested itself in another way. During the prayer before dinner, Elias felt an impulse to give thanks not only for the food, but also for all the times he had felt God's presence in difficult moments. "I'm grateful because God has never left me alone," he said. His family was silent for a moment, moved by the sincerity of his words. In Psalms 145:18 it says, "The Lord is near to all who call on him in sincerity." For Elijah, this closeness was not an abstract idea, but a tangible reality that he experienced on a daily basis. Elijah understood from an early age that his journey would not be easy. He faced challenges that often seemed greater than his age could bear. As a child, he felt that he didn't quite fit in with his peers, and this made him lonely at many times. When the other boys in the village played in groups, he stood to one side, watching. But this loneliness, rather than discouraging him, seemed to shape him. One of the most difficult challenges of his childhood occurred on Thanksgiving Day, when he was just 8 years old. His father, who worked as a lumberjack, had a serious accident in the forest and was unable to work for months. The family, which was already living on very little, found itself in an even tighter situation. Elias, even at such a young age, decided to help. He started getting up early every morning to collect firewood that he could sell in the village. His efforts caught the attention of a neighbor, who began to buy the firewood at a fair price, ensuring that the family would not go hungry that winter. The challenges didn't stop there. At school, Elias was the target of jokes because of his introspective nature. Many said he was strange or weird, but he didn't let that get to him. His grandfather always told him, "The stones on the path aren't there to stop you, Elias. They are there to teach you to be stronger." And so he did, turning every difficulty into an opportunity to grow. In Romans 5:3-4, Paul writes, "And not only that, but we also glory in tribulations, Because we know that tribulation produces perseverance. Perseverance, approved character. And approved character, hope. Elijah lived this truth. Every challenge he faced made him more resilient, more prepared for the purpose God had in store for him. Elijah had an almost insatiable curiosity for stories that carried deep meanings. While other children were interested in fairy tales or fictional adventures, he was drawn to stories from the Bible and accounts of people who had faced great trials with faith. One of his favorites was that of Joseph, who, even betrayed by his own brothers, kept his trust in God and became a leader who saved many from starvation. Elijah used to say, "Joseph never gave up because he knew that God had a plan for him. I want to be like that." At Christmas, when he was 9, the village pastor organized a play about the birth of Jesus, and Elias was chosen to play one of the Magi. During rehearsals, he dedicated himself more than any other child, not because he wanted to stand out, but because he believed that the story deserved to be told truthfully. When the play was over, the pastor said, "Elijah, you didn't play a role. You lived the message. That's rare." This fascination with stories also led him to look for lessons in everyday events. On Thanksgiving Day, while helping his mother prepare supper, he asked, "Mom, why should we be grateful even when things are difficult?" She replied, "Because God doesn't abandon us, even in storms." Gratitude helps us remember that. These words stayed with Elijah and shaped his worldview. Hebrews 12:1 says, "Therefore we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders us, and the sin that entangles us, and let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us." Elijah saw these witnesses in the stories he read and in the people around him, finding inspiration to continue on his own journey. Elijah wasn't satisfied with superficial answers. He wanted to understand the why of things, especially questions related to faith and the purpose of life. When he was 10 years old, he asked the village pastor, "If God knows everything, why does he allow bad things to happen?" The pastor, instead of dodging the question, answered patiently, "Elijah, God allows challenges because they shape us. It's through them that we discover our strength and our faith." This search for answers accompanied him at all times. On Thanksgiving Day, while his family was giving thanks for that year's harvest, Elias asked, "If we're giving thanks today, why don't we give thanks every day?" His grandfather, smiling, said, "Daily gratitude is the greatest gift we can give to God." But Thanksgiving reminds us of that all the more. Elias then began to make a habit of it. Every night before going to sleep, he would mentally list 3 things he was grateful for. This practice helped him face the difficult days with more faith and hope. In Proverbs 2:3-5 we read, "If you cry out for understanding and for insight, if you seek wisdom as one seeks silver and search for it as one searches for hidden treasure, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God." Elijah lived this search with intensity, knowing that each question brought him closer to the divine answers. The 10th, and perhaps most impressive sign in Elijah's life, was his resilience. Even in the face of the greatest difficulties, he found the strength to carry on. Once, during a storm, the family home was partially destroyed. While his mother cried and his father tried to repair the damage, Elias began to rally the neighbors to help. He knew he couldn't fix everything himself, but he also knew he couldn't just wait. "God always gives us what we need to overcome," he said, repeating a phrase he had heard from his grandfather. This resilience was not only physical, but also spiritual. When he faced rejection or mockery, Elijah prayed. When he felt afraid, he recited Psalm 23. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." He knew that his strength came not just from himself, but from his connection with God. In 2 Corinthians 12:10, Paul says, "When I am weak, then I am strong." Elijah lived this truth. Every fall made him stronger. Every obstacle brought him closer to his purpose. And so, we see how Elijah's journey was marked by signs that he was a chosen one, someone set apart for a greater purpose. But what about you? Listening to this story, can you identify some of these signs in your own life? Could it be that moments you've experienced, however simple or challenging they may have seemed, were pointing to something that God has in store especially for you? Share your experience in the comments. Talk about moments when you felt something inexplicable, as if God was guiding your steps, or when you realized that you were different in some way. Your story could inspire others to also recognize the signs of God in their lives. And for those who want to prepare spiritually for Christmas, we have a special opportunity. THSE Chosen, the 40-day devotional with the Redeemer. Just as Elijah was shaped by each experience, you too will be challenged and transformed throughout these 40 days. Each day is a chance to grow. Listen to God's voice and allow Him to direct your steps. At the end of this journey, you will have more clarity about God's purpose for your life and be better prepared to live according to His will. How does the devotional work? Every day, you will be introduced to a new reflection based on Scripture. Each lesson includes a Bible verse that will serve as spiritual nourishment for your soul. There are also practical questions and challenges to apply what you've learned in your daily life. This journey is an opportunity for transformation. Take time to meditate, pray, and reflect on each lesson. Allow God to speak to your heart, and let His words renew your mind and direct your steps. This devotional is not just a book. It is a profound and practical guide to a more intimate encounter with God. Use it to grow spiritually, mark the passages that touch your heart, and interact with the lessons in a personal way. Get ready to experience a different Christmas, with more meaning and connection to God's purpose. Start this journey of transformation today. We look forward to hearing your story. Leave a comment and let's share, learn, and grow in faith together.